everyone, Karen from Stitches and Things, Meetung, close to Lakes Entrance in Victoria. I'm going to talk to you today about circular knitting needles. A lot of people might call them a round needle, but I'm going to call them circulars. And the reason why a lot of people are so scared of them, as soon as you say a project's done in the round or on round needles, they like have a panic attack. I can't use round needles. I don't understand them. So let's see if we can help you out with that. So the reason why we would use a round needle or a circular needle is either if we're making a blanket, we want capacity. So we're going to knit backwards and forwards, not round and round, but we're going to have room to put all our stitches on. So I'll show you that. The other one is if we want to knit something that doesn't have a seam. So a sock, a glove, a hat, a toy, something that doesn't have a seam that we need to knit round and round and round without a seam. The other cool thing with knitting round and round and round and round and round is that every round knit makes stocking stitch. You don't have to do any purl, which is very, very handy. I will show you a technique how to get up to your last few stitches with the same needle. A lot of people think that once you get to a certain point, if your cable doesn't fit, then you have to work with double points. I don't use double points for anything. So when we're talking about double points or DPN, double pointed needle, there is your double pointed needle set. Some people like these. I'm not a fan and don't actually own any. And having said that, I don't own any straight needles either. I knit everything on my circulars, backwards and forwards, all round and round. So you won't need double pointed needles, or also known as a set of 4, to achieve a beanie. So a lot of people will have a look at a pattern. The pattern says you're going to need a 60 centimeter for this part, and then you're going to need a 40 centimeter for this part. You shouldn't need to change. Generally, we can use what's called the magic loop technique for that. So the system that I work with that I really love are the KnitPros. So how these work is you pick your needle tips. So these are a beautiful laminated birchwood, which is my choice of needle. And these ones are Zings, which are a lovely slippery anodized aluminium. And that's your cable. So these come separately. So the reason why they come separately is I will have a look at what project I'm going to do. I will choose my needle size. So if I'm doing 8 play, I might choose a 4mm needle, and then I will see how big my project's going to be. So if it's a small project, short cable, big project, big cable, and I screw them together, and away we go. We have a circular needle system. So this is what the cable looks like. It's just a simple cable with a screw on the end and a bit blurry, screw on the end, and it makes your needle like that. So I've got this one set up with something that I'm knitting backwards and forwards. I'll show you that in a moment. And I have set up a little sample somewhere where I'll show you how to join in the round, because a lot of people can't figure out how to join in the round, or they just don't understand how you can knit round and round. But the biggest thing that I find is with my blanket kits, we try and have no seams. I'll say it's knitted on a circular, and people go, oh, no, I'm not knitting that, I can't do circulars. So there's a couple of reasons why people don't like circulars. A, if they've used needles that are garbage, so either they have a memory in the cable where it has got a permanent coil in it, not much fun. And the other one is if you have a transition through this part, the transition is not smooth. So if every time you try and push your needle in or out of here, it catches on here, it's not fun either. So if you're going to work with circular needles, get yourself something decent, something that slides nicely, doesn't have a memory in the cable, and doesn't catch. So if you can sort of deal with all of those things, then you're laughing with your circulars. So I'm going to change the camera angle, and then I'm going to show you a few little tips and techniques on how to master your circular knitting needles like a pro. Okay, so firstly, I'm just going to show you a knitting bag that I made and the circular needles that I use. So that's my set of KnitPros, minus the ones that I've actually either are demonstrating with today or are on other projects. So I've got a few different lengths of cables. That's our little key that helps us tighten, and I'll show you how to put the needles together. They are not tricky. So that's our cable. We just screw that together. Some people say, oh, I don't like needles that screw together, they come undone. Well, if you do them up with a key, so the key is simply putting the key through the hole. This gives me something to hang on to. So all you do is making sure you've got something to hang on to, nip it up. Rules are, if you can't undo it with your fingers, it's not going to come undone with your knitting. If you're too lazy to tighten it, it is going to come undone. So make sure you tighten it up with a key. If you don't have a key, a safety pin, anything that fits in that hole is going to work. So tighten it up. The other thing, I'm not going to put one on the other end of this, because the other thing that is really fabulous about this system is if you need to use a longer cable, we have cable connectors. So they just join between two cables. You get a pack of 3 for $3.90, and you can join more together. So if you're knitting something big, you can start off with shorter cables and keep joining, which means I find I like the 50s, 60s and 80s the best. I think I've only got one longer one. I just join them together if I want longer needles. So the other thing that is a bit tricky are the 40 centimetre cables. So when you buy cables, when you buy KnitPro cables, and I had one here and I buried it, the packaging tells you what the size is, but the size is, the needle size, I still haven't found it, I've buried it completely. The size on the packet is the size of the needle tip to tip once you've installed the parts. So with a 40 centimetre, these are what's called a standard length needle. There is a short needle. You have to use a short needle if you're going to use the 40 centimetre cable, because otherwise by the time you get it into the knitting position, it doesn't work. So there is, that says that's a 50 centimetre cable. So you're going to end up with a 50 centimetre tip to tip, which is perfect for beanies. So I'm just going to move the camera down here, and I have, what I'll do is I'll start off with the backwards and forwards knitting, which is perfect if you've got large capacity. In my case here, I don't have large capacity, I just have something quite short. So what happens is, my wool's up this end. What happens is people can't get their head around, if it's a circular needle, what happens if when they get to the end, they just can't. This is something I was demonstrating before. So I'll just whip to the end, and I will, so usually what I'll say to people is, so when you get to the end of your knitting, when you're knitting with regular knitting needles, what do you do when you get to the end? And they'll look at me blankly and go, well, I'm going to turn around. And that is exactly what you're going to do. I'll just slip that, just get to the end. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to get to the end of our row here. So this was the painted ripple scarf. So it's so when you get to the end, normally you get to the end and you're going to turn around and you're going to go back the other way. And that's exactly all we do with working backwards and forwards on circulars. All you have to do is imagine that you don't have a cable there. That's all you have to do. Simple as. No, pretend there's no cable. So this means if I was using this cable, I can fill that up much, much more than jamming a whole lot of stitches onto my needle. The other thing that we like to say is that if you're working with something that's a bit heavy, your work is on your knee and not on your needle. So what I've done here, I'm just going to show you how to join in the round. I've just cast on a few stitches. I'm going to use this length cable in the round for to make a circle. And we're going to use what we call the magic loop technique, which is simply a way of knitting in the round with not too many stitches. So I just think I might need to lift my camera up a bit because that might be a little bit better. Let's try that. So what we're going to do is I'll just bring my stitches down into the middle of my cable and then put about half on each cable. Draw them up. So we're going to draw our tips up. You'll notice I've got a small tip and a big tip. It's something that I do when I'm working in the round, and I will show you why I do that. So we need to have, unless you're left-handed, we're talking about right-handed today. So I'm showing you all the right-handed ways, and if you're left-handed, then you have to go the other way. So what I've done is I've actually cast on one more stitch than the pattern says. I've drawn them all up onto the tips. This is my yarn that I'm going to be knitting with. And we're going to go this way. That's the way we always go, isn't it? If we're going to knit onto this needle. So the reason why this is small will become apparent in a minute. And I discovered this by pure accident and I absolutely love the idea. So what we're going to do to join in the round without having any jump is I am just simply going to slip one stitch from this needle onto this needle. And then I'm going to knit these first two stitches together, and that will give me a nice tight join. So all we need to do now, we can't knit like this. We've got it doesn't work. So the needle that has the long tail, we're going to say long tail, long needle. We pull this forward out of our knitting, and now we can knit with it. And we're going to knit those first two stitches together. And we're just going to knit across these few stitches on this needle. So the magic loop technique, if you're knitting a beanie, I find with a 50 centimetre cable, the first few rounds of my beanie are a little bit too tight. Like there's not enough stitches to go right the way around. So I'll use this technique until there's enough stretch. So now you can see I have knitted to the end. I have one needle in, one needle out. We are going to draw both needles in. So that's the one I've just knitted onto. Long tail, long needle. So what we're doing is knitting across one side and then across the other side. So the reason why I have the small needle on my left, so my right hand needle is the correct size for what I'm knitting with. And it's making the stitches. It's forming the right size stitch. And my other one, which is a smaller needle, it just makes it much easier to slide the stitches up onto it. So we've got to the end. So we draw both needles back in, and smaller needle draws back in really, really easy. And long tail, long needle, and knit across these. So we are knitting in the round with not many stitches. So if you could imagine that if you've cast on the band of your beanie, and you've got all the body of your beanie done, you've done your band, you've done your body, you start to decrease, suddenly you have got not enough stitches to go the whole way round. Then all you need to do is divide your work in half, draw them up onto your needles and use this technique. You can see there I am working in the round. So again, one out, one in, both in, long tail, long needle, knit across there. It's very quite simple. You can see that I am just using the knit stitch here. I am not doing any purl. When I get to the end of here, I will show you that every round knit makes stocking stitch. And most of us are pretty happy to do every round knit in stocking stitch. There we go. So there's your little piece of work in the round and a nice firm join. So they are really quite easy to work with. Nice and smooth transition. And the other thing with the circular, whether you're knitting backwards and forwards or round and round, when you're finished for the day, it can all go down onto the cable. Nothing's going to fall off in your knitting bag. So the benefits of the circular, if you've got hand issues or wrist issues, you will find that your circulars will help you out in that respect because you've not got so much weight on your work. So I'm just pulling that back up so that we can see. So I've just made sure that the outside's on the outside. The thing that sometimes happens is for whatever reason, people can go back the other way. So if you weren't watching what you were doing, usually if your yarn is on this side, this needle, we're going to knit onto this needle. But sometimes people do manage to knit back the other way, forget that they're not knitting round and round, and will knit backwards and forwards. And so main thing is take a note where your yarn is. Think about what happens when you're using straight needles. If your yarn is on this needle, you're going to knit off that needle. You're not going to turn around and knit off this needle. So it's still, we're working anti-clockwise, 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 unless of course you're a lefty, and then you are going to work the other way. Well, some don't, but the majority do. So your circular needles are good for that. I sometimes will use 2 circulars, but we won't go there today. So if you possibly can get yourself a decent set of circulars, my suggestion is to pick 2 or 3 sizes that are sizes that you use regularly. So for me, 325s, 4s, maybe 4.5s, and then a 50, a 60 and an 80 cable, and then just add to your collection. They've got a 1-year warranty on them, and they're absolutely fabulous to work with. So don't be afraid of your circular needles. They are perfectly fun to use. I think I know people that knit continental can have problems because they're used to having a needle that sticks under their arm. This one doesn't stick under your arm. And sometimes people look at them, oh, I couldn't knit with that, it's too short. But really, there's plenty to hang on to. Like, there's not as if there's a tiny little piece to hang on to. It is quite, it's not an issue to hang on to them. The other thing that happens for me, which is rather cool being able to change these, is when I knit straight, so backwards and forwards, my purl row is a bit looser. So I'll put a 1 size smaller on the row that I do the purl. I don't need to worry on this because round and round and round, we're using the same needle continually, so the tension is much more even than if we have to knit a purl row. So keep in mind. The other thing, have a look at if you've changed something that's flat into round. So if I have a beanie pattern that is a flat pattern, and I turn it into round, sometimes the tension can be a bit firmer. So, but it's very, very easy to do that, and less sewing up if you knit things in the round. No seams. It's fabulous. All right, have a go at that. Follow the links if you would like to buy yourself a couple of pairs of KnitPro needles. The postage is cheap as for these. There is a little coupon code to give you cheap postage on these. We don't charge you for a parcel for them. And you will benefit from fabulous knitting with beautiful quality and very pretty knitting needles.